time to spotlight Hollywood, where it looks like after more than 4 months, the Writers Guild strike is over after the WGA and studios announced a temporary agreement or a tentative agreement over the weekend. For more, let's bring in Jamie Lumley, senior analyst at Third Bridge. Jamie, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So I think it's important to note this is still a tentative agreement, nothing set in stone yet, but I saw a quote from the WGA calling the agreement exceptional with meaningful gains and protections for writers in every sector. What more do we know about this exceptional agreement?
So there definitely remains a number of things that we haven't heard about. In terms of the details of this agreement, so far it seems that there are some more guarantees from studios that writers will be kept in the writing room for TV shows longer than previously. And also that there have been some changes when it comes to residuals, which has definitely been a really key thing in this whole process. As we look at this industry with increasing emphasis on where streaming is going, there's not been a lot of transparency around data, the success of shows on streaming platforms versus the traditional TV landscape of linear distribution. So really looking at how that has shifted, what sort of progress has been made in those 5 days of negotiations we've had up until now to iron out this deal, that's where really some of the most important aspects will be, which will ultimately determine how happy both parties are coming out of this agreement.
What about the role of AI? Because I know that was a key concern for writers going into this. Any clarity on how they're going to be dealing with the role of AI?
So far, it seems there hasn't been that much which we have heard about for AI. As you mentioned, this was a very important area because there were a lot of writers that were concerned that if not being outright replaced, this could reduce the number of writers in writing rooms. This could ultimately pose a major threat to their role in this industry. So that's definitely a key area to look at and is also central to the actors' strike, which is still ongoing, as the way in which AI will be able to either replace or fully alter the involvement of people in this industry is a big concern. So definitely something to keep an eye on, as also it is still fairly nascent. A lot of this is talking about what sort of impact there could be down the road, as to date, it's still not fully understood the extent that AI could revolutionize the TV industry.
So studios have said that the strike in the shorter term has actually been saving them money, but in the longer term, there would be financial fallout because they have no content to actually deliver and charge for. So what do we know in terms of the fallout, given that this lasted 4 months? Which companies are, stand to benefit or to have lost the most from this strike?
It's a good question, and there are a lot of moving parts. To start off, what we've been hearing from experts is that by and large, although companies are in different positions, there really isn't a lot of opportunity for market share gains or improvement here. It's really much more of what degree can these studios and streamers mitigate the impact of the strikes versus necessarily gaining versus competitors. And a couple things to look at here. There may have been some of those short-term benefits as companies were not spending on their content development. But at the same time, one of the things that we hear from experts day in and day out is just what sort of impact there is for these streaming platforms when the velocity of new content slows. What does that do to subscriber numbers? And across the board, this could be a churn driver. It could lead consumers to perhaps change up what services they're engaging with, maybe engage more with fast options, those free ad supported TV where they don't have to spend for a platform which is not having new content. So a couple things to keep in mind there. Also, just looking at the real size of the impact, one of the key areas to look at is Warner Brothers Discovery, which came out and revised down their 2023 earnings by $300 to $500 million as a result of the strikes. So you can really see the magnitude of this can be quite large. And it's also important to understand that while the writer's strike may be ending, production of shows, of movies is not going to continue until both strikes have been able to conclude and find a new deal, because at this point, actors are still not able to promote their shows and movies, and this could definitely impact the release schedule for the remainder of the year into 2024. So definitely still some things to look at there as well.
Well, that's a good point. What impact could this have on the actors' strike that, of course, is still ongoing? Could this pave the way for a deal there as well?
So movie studios are certainly hoping that this will be able to have one agreement right after the other, but it's worth looking at the differences between these two strikes and the issues that are disputed, because while there are similarities, such as around the role of AI, around what the new residual payment structure will look like, there are also some differences. So what we've heard from our experts is that, generally speaking, on any show's budget, about 5 to 10% will be allocated towards writers, whereas 10 to 50% is allocated towards acting talent. So that's definitely a much larger piece of the pie. So any incremental changes when it comes to residual restructures or just the overall compensation there will have a much larger effect on overall budgeting than what the agreement for the writers might entail. So looking at that, there's more at stake. It might take a little bit more time to iron that out, but studios are certainly at this point really chomping at the bit to get production going again so that they can look to salvage the next TV season and then also get things moving again on their film side as well.
Okay, so Jamie, a lot to still consider, a lot of questions that still need to be answered. But if you take a look at all of the streaming stocks right now, given potential fallout, given where they stand in terms of that path to profitability, which would be your top pick right now?
So as we look at the landscape, we've been hearing a few things from experts, and Netflix, the one profitable streaming company, definitely comes out at the top of the list as companies able to manage this crisis, mainly just because they have a robust content pipeline to continue to have new releases over the course of the strikes. They also have very strong international production capabilities, which will allow for some content to continue to be produced during this time period. And also, just back to the strong business fundamentals, they are making money, which is not the case for Disney streaming business or Warner Brothers Discoveries or Paramounts. So this definitely is an advantage. That being said, just circling back to the earlier point, it is still a challenging time for everybody. International content is not a direct substitute to American content. If you look at stuff which is still new, such as sports, for example, the sports audience is not necessarily the same as what you would have for a scripted drama. So there are still some challenges here. But if we look to the companies which are in a slightly more challenging position, if we think about Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, they rely a lot on their business in the traditional TV landscape, and the fall has definitely been challenging with the lineups being shifted, an increased emphasis on reality TV, unscripted shows has definitely made it a bit tougher for them. Those companies that are still trying to maintain their legacy TV businesses while also drive profitability in streaming. So that's what we've been hearing from experts, but there's still definitely a number of challenges for all these players here.
All right, all good points to consider. Jamie Lumley, thanks so much for sharing your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.